Hello and welcome to our webinar, Algebra 2 Intro. This is a lesson that needs to be watched before 5:12. So what we're going to start with is some of the basic definitions of what's going on in Algebra 2 and some of the things that people have trouble with they may or may not remember. So we're going to start by defining what a factor is, and a factor is basically anything that multiplies to get another number. So 8 times 2 would be 16, so 8 and 2 are factors. So these are our factors. 8 and 2 are factors of 16, and then you could have 3x times 2x, and that would be 6x, where 3x and 2x are factors. So they're numbers that multiply together to get another term. That's the definition of a factor. So we are going to create a factor tree down here, and so we just do it by figuring out what goes into 200. You could go as easy as 2 times 100. And then break 100 down, and you'll notice each time I'm bringing the 2 down the page, and I can't do that, and bringing the same 2 down, and so I break 100. I'm going to say 4 times 25, and then I really only have one more to go. Oops, I just bring the 2 straight down, and to break them down to their primes, and so if I break 4 down, it's 2 times 2, and 25 is 5 times 5. So the factoring, the prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. And that's the prime factorization of 200. And that's just what we were trying to do, is come up with the factors. So all of those guys are factors of 200. For 6x, it's as easy as going x cubed times x cubed, because remember we add the exponents, and then this guy gets broken down. These guys can break down to x times x times x. This one can be broken down to x times x times x. And so prime factorization is 6x's written in a row. Just like that. So then they say give this one a shot, and this is what we're going to be talking about, some of the things we're going to be talking about today. And the first thing you need to remember is greatest common factor. We always look for that first. So what do these guys have in common? Well, you'll notice that they have a 3 and an x. So that is what I'm going to factor out. If I take a 3x out, what do I multiply 3x by to get x squared? 3x squared would be x. If I distribute that back in, 3x times x is 3x squared. What do I multiply 3x by to get 6x? Well, that would be 2. And so that is what we're looking for. The greatest common factor in that original problem up here was 3x, and that's what I took out. So you always look for that first. And I'll remind you of that as we go along. So now I'm up here and I want to factor these guys. So the first thing is, what is my greatest common factor? So remember, greatest common factor is the first thing we look for. And you'll notice in this case that it looks like I have an x squared here and an x there. So I have an x in common. So I factor out my greatest common factor of x. What do I multiply x by to get 2x squared? Well, that would have to be 2x. What would I multiply x by to get negative x? That would have to be negative 1. If you take out a common factor, you always have to keep track. This guy does not go away because the x, you have to multiply it by something. Remember, factoring, we may or may not remember this, but factoring is the reverse of the distributive property. So then over here, I want to find out what is my greatest common factor. Well, I noticed that it is 3, and so I could factor out a 3, and that leaves me with an x plus 3. Remember, factoring is the reverse of the distributive property. 3 times x, 3 times 3 should get me what I started up there. So now we're talking about foiling, and foiling is kind of a distributive property. Also, there's a couple ways you can go about this, and we'll talk more about it in class, but I'm going to give you one way right now, which I'm going to use as the area model to multiply these together. I know it says FOIL, but this is doing the same thing. If you like FOIL, do FOIL, if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can do it this way, and this way will always work. So I'm going to put along the top one of these factors, x minus 1. Along the side, I put the same thing, x minus 3. I don't put the same thing, but I put the factors. So then I just have to find the area of the square. So the length of this side is x, right here. This side is x, and this side is x. So if I multiply those together, I get x squared. Remember, when you're multiplying variables together, the little number changes. When you're adding them, the big number out front changes. So then I take x times negative 1, because that's the height and the width. X times negative 1 is negative x, or negative 1x. And then if I take negative 3, the height here, times the width of x, I get negative 3x. And then last but not least, if I take negative 3 times negative 1, which would be the height here, negative 3, and the width, negative 1, which would be positive 3. So you'll notice that my red terms are like terms, and so if I combine all my terms together, I will get my final answer of this thing FOILed out, which would be x squared. Now I have negative 3 and negative 1, which is negative 4x, and then it's plus 3, and that is what it means to FOIL it out, and that's all we're trying to do is multiply these guys together. So you might want to try these on your own to see if you can do these. I'm going to do the next one with an area model also, and it shouldn't be any different. I'm going to take 2x plus 2 across the top and x minus 4. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. Just know that you just need to multiply these guys together. So x times 2x is 2x squared. X times 2 will get me 2x. And then I take negative 2x, or 2x times negative 4, which would be negative 8x, and then I'll take negative 4 times positive 2, which is negative 8. And so I just found the area of each little square, and when I combine, the red terms are my like terms. So 2x squared would be my first term, and then negative 8 and positive 2 would be negative 6x, and minus 8, that is my final term. So that's what we get when we FOIL these out. Again, we'll do it one more time just to make sure you really got it. So again, I set up my little box, and I'll say 3x plus 4 and 2x minus 1. And so now I just multiply 2x times 3x, which is 6x squared. Don't forget that we're multiplying them together. 2x times 4 is 8x. And negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. And negative 1 times 4 will get me negative 4. And so then I just combine my like terms. Well, the blue one doesn't combine with anybody, so it's 6x squared. The reds will combine, which will give me 5x. And then negative 4, which is my final answer that I'm looking for. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reverse this operation, and I'm going to show you a way to do that. So now we have this Xbox method, which will reverse the operation of multiplying these together, because you can see that these guys right here are basically the solutions to the problem that we had before. So what you can do is you just set up an x, you set up a big X like you do up there, multiply the first term, the number out front here, times the last term, which would be, in this case, 1 times 20, which is 20, and then you put the b value, which is the middle term, on the bottom down here, and that's 9. And so the b value, remember, this all goes from like our quadratic formula where we have a squared, negative b plus or minus the square root, all that fun stuff. So the a, b, and c do not change. So now what I need to do is I need to come up with the factors that combine together to get me b of a and c. So I'm going to, off to the side here, I'm going to write the factors of 20. I'm going to do a little factor tree. Actually, I'm not even going to do a factor tree. I'm just going to come up with the factors, things that multiply together to get me 20. And so I could do 2 times 10, which I could do, or I could do negative 2 times 10 or 2 times negative 10. And remember, I'm trying to get negative 9. So if I combine those together, do I get negative 9? No. Oh, wait, actually, no, I take that back. I'm going to erase that. All right, so if I do 20, and I'm trying to come up with negative 9, let's just come up with the factors. 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and I think that's really about it. And so if that's the case, and 1 and 20, I don't forget that one. Sometimes that one works. So then what I need to do is, if I combine these guys together, they need to get me negative 9. Well, it looks like this is my candidate. Well, the thing you have to understand is this positive sign means that both of the numbers that my factors are, both of my factors are going to get actually the sign in front of the 9, the negative 9. So I'm going to use negative 4 and negative 5 in there. Well, what this means for me is this is just the solution to the problem. X minus 4, x minus 5. And that's really all we're trying to do. That's our factoring. If I do the X box and multiply these together, I'll do it as quickly as I can. I'm not going to talk all the way through it. But if I set up the X box and say x minus 4, x minus 5, and find the area, well, I get x squared, negative 4x, negative 5x, and looks like positive 20. And you can see then, combining my terms, I end up with that. And so it's not a bad thing to check these every time.